It was a stifling summer day in Goa, the kind of heat that made the sand on the beach feel like it was on fire, burning under my bare feet. I was there with Rahul, my longtime friend, looking for an adventure, something to shake up the monotony of everyday life. The tide was low, the sky a vast, unbroken blue. We could feel the warm breeze and the sound of the waves surrounded us, almost seductive. Rahul was the first to notice. There was something floating in the water, strangely close to the shore. It wasn't unusual to find bits of trash or even lost objects drifting along, but that didn't look like just any debris brought in by the currents. A shape, darkly human, was floating on its back. Rahul laughed, thinking it was some drunk fisherman. But me, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. We decided to swim out to it, curious as always. The warm waters of Goa were usually welcoming, but as we swam closer, I felt the air shift. The breeze grew cold, and the sound of the ocean distorted. It was as if the waves were whispering. "Rahul, do you feel that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're just imagining things, man," he replied, though I could see the tension building in his shoulders. When we finally reached what we thought was a person, there was nothing solid at least. Just the clear water, barren, as if the figure had simply vanished. "Rahul, where?" I could barely finish the question. My heart was racing, a lump forming in my throat. "Let's head back," I suggested, but Rahul didn't move. He stood there, staring at the horizon, as if he'd heard something I couldn't hear. "Rahul?" I tried again, but he didn't respond. In a moment, he dove under, disappearing beneath the waves. Panic gripped me. I dove after him, desperately searching. The water was shallow, but as I swam deeper, the ocean seemed infinitely vast. I felt trapped, my heart pounding with every second I couldn't find him. I surfaced, gasping, shouting his name. Nothing, just the muffled sound of the wind and the ocean, which now felt indifferent to my despair. Desperate, I swam back to the shore. My legs were shaking as I finally reached the sand. I looked back, expecting to see Rahul emerge, but he never did. I ran, shouting for help, but the beach was empty. The few tourists who had been there had disappeared, and the locals selling their trinkets were gone too, as if they had never been there. In the distance, I heard a sound, a soft, almost melodic sound, coming from the waves. A voice, familiar. It was Rahul. Heart pounding, I followed the sound back to the ocean. The voice grew closer, calling to me. He had to be alive, he had to be. But something deep inside me knew I shouldn't go. Something screamed at me to stop, to run. And then I saw them, shadows in the water, dancing beneath the waves. It was like the sea was full of things, shapes I couldn't understand. What was that? Hallucination? Fear? I didn't know. But something pulled me back into the water, as if the ocean itself was swallowing me. I walked to the edge, my heart racing. The psalm was irresistible, and the moment the water touched my feet, coldness crept through me, chilling me to the bone. I couldn't think straight, my head was spinning, but all that mattered was finding Rahul. I waded in deeper. Each step felt heavier, as if the waves were dragging me down. But I kept going, until there was no beach behind me. Suddenly, I felt something grab my ankle. I looked down and saw nothing but the darkness of the sea. I tried to scream, but my body was paralyzed. The water now reached my chest, then my neck. The sound of the psalm, that soft, hypnotic melody, now sounded like a distant scream, a cruel laugh. And then, in that final moment, I understood. The ocean never wanted to give Rahul back, and now it wanted me to.
You've heard of Ocracoke, right? That island off the coast of North Carolina. It's not just famous for its beautiful, peaceful beaches. There's another side to it, something people don't really talk about. Only the locals understand, or are brave enough to admit. And well, I shouldn't be telling you this, but after what happened to me, I have to let it out. I've always heard the stories, about Blackbeard, the pirate. They say he was killed here, and that his decapitated head still haunts people on stormy nights. Nonsense, right? I always thought it was just folklore to scare tourists. But when you live here, you start to notice the island has a different kind of energy. It's not the sea, not the dunes or the seagulls. It's something deeper, something that watches you. It was just a regular Tuesday. I went for a walk on the beach, like I always do. I needed to clear my head. It had been a tough week. The sky was overcast, with that humid breeze typical around here, but nothing too alarming. Walking on the sand usually helps me sort my thoughts. I know every corner of this beach, every curve of the coastline, and I knew it wasn't a good idea to walk too far when the sun started setting. But that day, I don't know. Something was pulling me, something I couldn't ignore. The sun began to sink behind the clouds. The wind picked up, and that's when I saw it. In the distance, there was a figure standing right in the middle of the sand, not near the water, which was already strange. People who come to the beach usually stay close to the shore, but this person, they were standing there, completely still. But it wasn't a relaxed posture, It wasn't someone resting or looking out at the ocean. It was too rigid, like a statue. I felt that weird chill run down my spine, but of course my curiosity got the best of me. I decided to get closer. Every step I took, the wind seemed to push me back. As I got closer, I noticed the figure was wearing something heavy, like a dark cloak, almost like an old raincoat, but more ancient, They were facing away from me, staring straight at the horizon, but the strangest thing was the lack of sound. The wind and sea were noisy, but around this figure, there was a suffocating silence. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out kind of shaky. Nothing. The figure didn't move. That's when the panic started to rise. Something was wrong, very wrong. I got closer than I should have, I admit. I tried to see their face, but it was like their head was covered in shadows. Shadows that didn't make sense, because the sun was nearly gone, and there wasn't enough light to cast shadows like that. It was when the wind stopped, completely. The silence became deafening, and then I heard a whisper, not from the figure, but around me, like the sand itself was speaking. But I couldn't make out the words. I took a step back, and that's when the figure finally moved. Slowly, it turned its head toward me, but the face was empty. There was nothing. Just a black void, deep, endless. I ran. I ran like my life depended on it. I didn't look back. I just wanted to get away. When I finally reached the road, panting and terrified, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were no footprints in the sand. Not mine, not the figure's. Like I had never been there. Like it never happened. Since then, I've avoided that part of the beach. But every night, when the wind blows in that strange way, I hear those whispers. And sometimes, I feel like something is watching me. No, not the ocean. Something older, deeper, buried beneath the sand of this cursed island. I know you might think I'm losing it, but if you ever come to Ocracoke, stay away from the beach at dusk, especially if it's empty. Because if you see something, or someone, standing on the sand, don't go near it. Don't call out. Pretend you didn't see. Because I think it's still there, and one day it might be waiting for you.
I was never one to believe in stories. I always thought that the local legends, the ones the people of Fernando de Noronha tell tourists, were just a way to grab attention. But that evening, when the sun was already setting on the horizon and the tide was rising, something changed. I can still smell the salty air, feel the warm sand under my feet, and the silence. That strange, heavy silence that swallowed everything around me. Have you ever felt something like that? The Brazilian island of Fernando de Noronha is a paradisiacal place. Everyone knows that. But what no one tells you is that when night falls, when the sound of the waves stops being relaxing and turns into something almost threatening, the island shows another side. They told me that some beaches, especially the more isolated ones, hold old stories, secrets that the elders avoid mentioning. And me, curious as I am, thought that exploring one of these beaches would just be another adventure. It was on one of those beaches at Bahia do Sancho, a deserted and isolated place where everything began. I had heard a legend, something about voices rising from the water at dusk. They say they're spirits, old fishermen who disappeared at sea. Just a legend, I thought. But that night, something very real happened. I was alone, sitting on the sand, admiring the sea. The sun was slowly setting, casting that orange glow everywhere, until the wind stopped. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when the wind dies down on an island, the world seems to freeze. I felt suspended, even though my feet were still buried in the sand. That's when I heard it. A voice. No, not just any voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, coming from the water. Come. I thought it was my mind playing tricks. We hear what we want to hear, right? But for some reason, I stood up and started walking toward the sea. I don't know why I did that. My mind was screaming to stop, but my feet kept sinking into the sand, getting closer to the waves. I tried to rationalize it. It was just the sound of the wind, or maybe the water moving over the rocks. But the sound continued, and with each step, it became clearer. Come. With the water already up to my ankles, a chill ran down my spine. There was something in the water. It was impossible to see clearly, but between the movement of the waves, I swear there was a shadow. Too big to be a fish, too low to be a boat. It was a shape, a silhouette, dancing between the waves. Come. The voice whispered again, stronger this time. My body froze, but my mind was in chaos. What was I doing? Why had I come this far? That's when I turned, trying to run back to the shore. That's when I saw footprints. Footprints that weren't mine, because they started from where I was standing and led into the sea. But there was no one there. Every part of me screamed that this didn't make sense. I ran like never before, but the sound of the water, the sound of the waves wouldn't stop. When I finally reached the dry sand, I turned one last time. And then I saw something I'll never forget. The shadow was closer now, right by the water's edge, watching me. It looked like a person, but not completely. The body seemed to merge with the sea, as if it were part of it. And then it raised its hand, slowly and silently, pointing at me. I swallowed hard. My body wanted to collapse, but some force, made me take a step back, trying to retreat. It was in that moment that the shadow disappeared into the waves, leaving the sea calm, as if nothing had ever happened. I went back to the village that night, but I couldn't sleep. What was that? A ghost? A hallucination? I tried to talk to some locals the next day, but all I got were wary looks. No one wanted to talk about the beach. No one wanted to talk about the footprints. Now, when I tell this story, I realize sometimes when I'm alone and the sound of the waves surrounds me, I still hear that whisper, as if the sea is calling again. But I've never returned to that beach. Never again.